So if you are in grade 9 and you're starting to select your subjects that you're going to choose in order to help you to become a pilot, then this video is for you. What I would like to show you is how some of the subjects that you choose relate to the subjects that you will have to write in getting your pilot license. Now, ultimately, the first step in getting or becoming a professional pilot is getting the private pilot license. The private pilot license, or any form of pilot license, you can actually divide it into two different aspects of training. The first one is academic, and the second one is practical training. Now, in terms of the academic side, you have you do have 8 subjects that you need to write. These are online written exams. Then the practical side of training is related more so to something like a driving test, where you have to use your hands and your feet. This is something that ultimately I would say in your matric you can't necessarily prepare for unless you at some point are learning how to drive. So that's why we're going to focus more so on the academic side, because it is your subject choice which will closely relate to this. Okay, so on the academic side, there are 8 different exams that you have to do. 8 written online exams that you have to do for the private pilot license. And then I want to show what subjects that you can choose that closely relate to these and why you should choose them. So the first subject is air law. Now, air law is one of the biggest subjects that you need to learn in aviation. Pretty much everything encompassing becoming a pilot is overarched by air law. And so for this, I would recommend selecting English, particularly because with air law, the biggest hurdle that people experience is understanding or interpreting what the law means. So if you have a wider breadth of vocabulary, but also understanding of the grammatical structures, etc., then you'll have a better chance of interpreting the air law. The second license that you have to do is a restricted radio license, but in reality, this is going to be something that you're going to be using on a day-to-day basis when you fly, right? So you'll have to communicate with air traffic control, you have to communicate with other aircraft in the vicinity. So to communicate, the number one language that is used is English. English is the global language that is used in aviation as stipulated by an organization called ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization. But I do have to say, because you are going to be flying in South Africa, Afrikaans is actually something that will be also quite useful. Now, the reason being is because when you are flying, you will initially start with something called VFR, which is Visual Flight Rules. With Visual Flight Rules, when you are talking to air traffic control, you'll have to give reporting points, right? So let's say you're going from Johannesburg to Bloemfontein. Now, as you're going along from Johannesburg to Bloemfontein, air traffic control would like to know where you are. You have to report your position as so to keep a safe distance and separation from other aircraft. Now, you will find a lot of the reporting points are actually in Afrikaans. And if you're like me, I'm not an individual who had learned Afrikaans, so having to transition into being able to appropriately pronounce the Afrikaans reporting points was something that was a little bit of a challenge, and can still be a challenge for me. And so in this sense, I would say it is useful to know how to, at the very least, pronounce Afrikaans words. This would help you a long way, particularly operating in the South African environment. The next written exam that you have to do is navigation. Now, navigation, of course, is all about getting yourself from point A to point B. And I would say the most related topic or the most related matric subject to this is mathematics. Specifically trigonometry, geometry, as well as mental arithmetic. You will find you'll be doing a lot of calculations that are related to time, speed, and distance. And then later on, you'll be doing calculations that are related to, let's say, the descent profile of the aircraft, which the right angle triangle can be used in calculating, the time as well as the distance in which you will take in descending from a certain altitude down to, let's say, the touchdown zone of a runway. Next written exam that you have to do is flight planning and performance. I would say mathematics again is very useful for this, because you're going to be looking at a lot of graphs as well as tables in which you have to interpolate. And the meaning of interpolate, of course, is you're going to have to basically deduce appropriately the figure that you're trying to find between two different rows, let's say in a table, two different rows or values. In addition to this, there are also, of course, time, distance, and speed calculations involved in this. So again, this is all related to mathematics. So I would say inclusive in mathematics, you'd have to learn algebra, and again, this forms part of mental arithmetic. Subject number 4 that you'll have to write is principles of flight. This is all related to the physics of how an airplane flies and how an airplane reacts, as well as is affected by its environment. And so physics is the key subject matter that you'll have to learn in order to understand how the aircraft relates to its environment, which is particularly the air. Subject number 5 is aircraft technical and general knowledge. ATG is related to the mechanics of the aircraft, how the aircraft works. So basically just looking under the hood of the plane. So it could also be related to engineering of the aircraft. So let's say, for example, you took the path of becoming an aeronautical engineer, or you took the path of becoming a mechanic for aircraft. As a pilot, you still have to know how the aircraft works. And the reason being is because if you have issues during a flight, you want to be able to troubleshoot it, and you want to know how to be able to determine where the problem lies in the plane. So I would say studying physics is still an important subject to learn for ATG. I would also include in that engineering, graphics, and design. Sure, engineering, graphics, and design is more related to the design of certain engineering items, but if you are able to understand the process in which it takes to design and engineer something, then it is quite relatable to how aircraft are then the process of designing an aircraft. And so when you be able to look at a schematic of an airplane, be able to say, oh, okay, I see how this is all interconnected and how it works. The last subject that I think which would be related to ATG is IT or CAT. The reason being is aircraft of today, or most certainly aircraft of the future, but airliners of today are pretty much digital cockpits, what are actually called glass cockpits. And so you're doing more of a systems management approach versus actually stick and rudder flying, or using your hands and feet to control and manage the flight. And so it all falls back to how do you appropriately manage the flight and appropriately manage an emergency situation. You might find yourself where now you have to troubleshoot a coding error in the system versus an actual mechanical error in the aircraft. So learning IT systems and how such software and hardware interrelate with yourself will help in better understanding how to fly modern aircraft. The 7th subject to learn is meteorology. Meteorology is related to the study of weather, and the subject in which I think many of you would agree upon that you would think would be top of mind in aviation is geography for Matric. And this is true. Geography is very important not only for the study of meteorology, but it is also important for the study of navigation. Ultimately, you do need to know where you're going in the world, and if you know the countries, the cities, it will help you a long way. But going back to meteorology, the study of weather, this is quite a large subject matter, and so if you're able to understand how the weather interrelates around the world, geography will be a big help. Last but not least is human performance. Now, human performance is the study of the physiological side of you, so your body, as well as the mental side, so how the body and the mind is affected but also relates to the aircraft. So the mental side of things, the psychological side of things becomes a lot more important the more you progress in your professional career. How so? It becomes important in the sense of how you work as a team with other pilots. It becomes important in the sense of your attitude that you have, how you are going to prepare and or react to certain scenarios in the airplane. So the matric subject that you should best study for this are life sciences, but human performance is not necessarily such a big topic to know at the beginning. So having to go through the process of studying life sciences is not necessarily a need, but I would say it is useful nonetheless. Costs. Everybody wants to know, how much does pilot training cost? This is a bit challenging because it varies from individual to individual. Some people might be fast, some people might be very slow in their training. It's also related to how the capacity that your flight school has. So I would say all in all, it could cost you between 150,000 to 400,000 Rand. Next, I want to talk about 3 top tips I would like to give to parents. Tip number 1 is, you have to have the right attitude, or as a student, you have to have the right attitude. Aviation is about the right attitude. If you have a positive attitude, if you have an open attitude to learning, you will go a long way. Be humble, but also be confident in yourself and your abilities. Have the right attitude. So the 3 aspects related to attitude, is to have resilience, have attention to detail, but also spatial awareness. These 3 relate to the academic side of training as well as the practical side of training, but also the motivation that you require to go through the training. So the motivation is the resilience, the academic side is to have attention to detail, and then spatial awareness is related to the practical side of training. Top tip number 2, your child would need to start very early, or as early as they can. I say this because in one's younger years, earlier years, as an individual, you're a lot more flexible, you have a lot more freedom. The older you get, you have maybe a family, or maybe you have a mortgage, or maybe you have parents to take care of. So you're more fixated on what you can or cannot do. So if you get in early, in aviation, you have a tendency to move about a lot in terms of the job opportunities that they are, particularly in South Africa. There's something called like contract work, where you go to the DRC, or maybe you go to Afghanistan, or maybe you go to Mali, all sorts of countries where you have to be flexible in be able to take that job. So if you get in early, if you get in younger, then you have that flexibility. Top tip number 3, I would say, is get in later. If you get in later, you have that life experience, you have worked a bit, you have saved a bit. Flying is very expensive. It is very expensive. So if you have a little bit of savings, but also if you do have that life experience, it will help you with the attitude that you require in going through that training. So that's it. I've included important links in the description below for further reading. Thank you everybody for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If you enjoy this type of content, please subscribe to my channel. I post every Wednesday or every other Wednesday. And if you want to see a video on what type of pilot careers you can have, or if you want to see a video on the commercial pilot license subjects that you have to do, let's say you've already done your private pilot license, then I also have a video on how to pass those exams. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.